All right, we're almost filling out. I want to be able to introduce our next panel, a successful podcast, creating and maintaining a successful podcast. By a show of hands, anybody here an avid podcaster or listener? I like how you both went up. So you're kind of in that realm where I'm in. I love podcasts so much that I feel like I have one in my head. I listen to them a lot. I start to develop the dialogue, the way I'm talking about things. I really feel like podcasts have become a mainstay in just the content that I consume. On that note, got to shout out our Driven Society podcast, Driven Minds. It's available on iTunes and all platforms. Amazing, amazing body of work. We're a couple of seasons in. I really, really recommend you check it out. And we're open to getting new people on board, so we might be able to get you on. Reach out to us through the socials, drivensociety.com. That being said, I'd like to bring up our next moderator, Major. He is a dancer, talent, model, content creator. So please, warm round of applause for Major.
Hello, 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 everybody. How's everyone doing today? Okay. So, yes, I am a dancer, actor, model, all that stuff. Anyway, short story. So when I was growing up, I used to ride in the car with my father, and I hated that he listened to talk radio, right? Hated it. Fast forward, I love podcasts. And here today, we are going to talk about everything podcast, okay? So I'm about to introduce our panelists. First, we have Estephanie. Next, we have Nathalie Farfan. Come on. Next, we have Jonathan Mena. Family in town? No, okay. And next, we have Juan Bago. And last but not least, we have Stephen Hobbs. So I'm going to go down the line and tell you guys a little bit about our panelists. First, we have Estephanie. You might recognize her from the podcast Bag Ladies, right?
Yeah, that is ours. Is this on? It is. You hear me? Yep. All right.
Microphone checker? No? Okay.
Hi, so I'm Estephanie. I'm part of the Bag Ladies podcast where we talk about baggage, about hey, let us help us help you with your baggage. And we talk about it because it's heavy and we got to let it go because we should. So, yeah. Right?
Word. Next, we have Nathalie, who is a community reviver, creator, brand builder, and storyteller. Hello.
Hi. And Bruja. He missed out that part. But yes, I'm also
Yes.
Bruja. I identify as one. And Morado Lens really was created as a free-form podcast to talk about Latinas, Afro-Latinas, indigenous women that get forgotten very often, and sex, culture, and spirituality.
Nice. And next, Jonathan Mena, who is a content creator and producer as well. You want to say hello?
Hello. I wear many hats for the Loudspeakers Network. We're a podcast network based out of New York. We have The Read, Brilliant Idiots, Friend Zone, a bunch of other ones. Thanks for coming.
And our next panelist, you might have seen all over your timeline with being featured in videos of BuzzFeed and Me Too. He is also a podcaster, and he co-hosts the podcast Latinos Out Loud.
Yes, so Latinos Out Loud is a weekly podcast that we get together and we judge the best Latino soft porn around the world. So we get together. It's growing, but no, that's my other one. No, Latinos Out Loud is a podcast that's a comedic one, and it's me, Frank Nibs, who is in the audience, Jamie Fernandez, and then Rachel Strauss Muniz, who just had her second baby. And I'm shouting out because they're probably live streaming. She's watching me right now. And we interview Latinos or politicians, journalists, actors, directors, in every sort of walk of life.
Nice. And we have the founder of Revolver and the vice president of Univision Communications, Steven. Oh, is it on? Is it singing?
Hello. Hey, guys. I was a podcaster with Univision starting in 2006. I was on the revenue side and realized that traditional media and ratings were, our currency was falling apart. When PPM came into the marketplace, you saw Spanish language listening drop dramatically, and there were really no alternative audio sources for us to rely on. So starting there, I was at Univision for 14 years, launched Revolve in 2016, and we were purchased and acquired August of last year. So now I run the business at Univision.
Nice. So I guess we're just going to jump right into it. Okay, so this goes to anyone who wants to answer this question. How does one start a podcast? Yes.
Two important things, I think, is a great idea and then a strategy. So you can have a great idea without a strategy, it won't go anywhere. And you can have a great strategy with a shitty idea, it won't go anywhere. But if you have both, I think if you marry them efficiently and with time and planning, I think that it's possible for anyone to create.
So when I first started the Bag Ladies podcast, the first thing we did was like, okay, let's figure out how much time we have, right? There are so many different podcasts and there are so many different styles. So like, you don't gotta like do what everybody else is doing. You could do whatever you want. So my co-host, she's in law school, so she's not here in the audience. And she don't got time. She's trying to be a lawyer or whatnot, and that takes time. So what we did is like, we could commit to 30 minutes a week. We could commit to recording. We could commit to producing. We could commit to that. So we decided 30 minutes, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. So find something that works for you and whatever you like talking about. I like talking about baggage. I like talking about, like, how can we feel better about that? So it's kind of like whatever you want to do, just make sure that, what works for you is what's going to keep you running for the long run.
For me, my biggest thing is you should have fun if you're doing it. This is a new medium. It's only 14 years old. I don't think we're even anywhere close to where it's going to be. So my biggest thing is to have fun, be organized, and have a great concept. I don't really like when people pitch me stuff like they're the, X, Y, and Z of this or that. Like, I like new concepts. So that's my biggest thing.
I'll just piggyback and say consistency, because a lot of times people have the fever that they want to start a podcast, and they'll do it for maybe a month and a half, and they'll stop, and then they try to start again. And it's really difficult when you're trying to do a podcast and you want your audience to grow. So I think consistency and be committed and have a sense of accountability that you want to continue doing it, and you will be rewarded with it.
And I think from my standpoint, our initial, our first big hit, if you will, was subject matter about getting people out of prison who have been wrongfully convicted through DNA evidence. And, being somebody I've never really served on a jury, I had no really knowledge about, either forced confessions or junk science or bite mark evidence, and it was really becoming, the podcast, I didn't find the podcast kind of found me. And that's really where it started with the story, and each individual story about, spending 28 years in jail for something they didn't do.
Well, as someone who loves podcasts, I guess my next question is, what does your process look like? Like, how do you prepare for each individual show? Is it like, do you go in being like, well, we're just going to wing it today? Or do you have obviously there's many different topics that each one of you guys will discuss, but what does your process look like?
So first, you get up in the morning, you got some breakfast in you. No, but more seriously, first thing we do is we prep a document, like what do we want to talk about, what is our format. So we switch every week, like, hey, I want to talk about this in the news, and I want to talk about this specific topic. So we're able to read it, understand it throughout the week. But when we actually physically record, we talk a little bit, we got to get juiced up. We can't just be like, okay, so 45 got us messed up this week, and so we start to talk a little bit about like, hey, how you doing? Like, you good? What did you eat? And then so our voices get used to being on a microphone and listening to ourselves. And then once we're like, okay, so let's start this. Hey, we're the Bag Ladies. So just prepping and then juicing up before you go, and then you go.
I like juicing up too. That's awesome. I mean, I think it's about getting excited about the topic that you're going to tackle. But for us, from Moderator Lens, we're very organized. So Google Docs and Google Calendars and they have not paid me for saying that, but there it is. I use them all day long to stay organized and, outreach and the angle that we want to go, the themes for that month. But how we do it, actually, people don't know that, is that we lock in Saturday and Sunday every month, and we bang out our 3 to 6 episodes that weekend. And then we have moving forward. So that helps us stay on top of our consistency part, like Juan Bago said. But also, one half of us is not here, Cindy, and she is a full-time worker, 9 to 5 in an office. I can't expect her to have the weekdays, and then I have my 4-year-old son who I tend to very often. So weekends, in essence, has become our podcast commitment, and we've been very consistent with doing Sundays. And sometimes a little wine helps, sometimes not, but you get prepared, you get happy with it, yeah.
So I've worked on both of these sides. Shows that want to do no show prep, which is infuriating, and then shows that want to have meetings about meetings, which is also infuriating. It's just all about finding a nice balance for it, seeing what works. Some people like that chaos. I personally don't. I like to prep. I like to organize, Google Docs, all that stuff, calendars. I also don't like the meetings about meetings too, but it's all about finding a nice balance and, having a good team so that everything can kind of fire on all cylinders. At least that's how I like it.
For us, it's sort of like a controlled madness in the sense that we all do improv, but we definitely don't want to have a 3-hour podcast. So we try to keep things as far as like a list of stuff that we're going to talk about. We always have a guest. So with guests, we have to do our homework and make sure that we're prepared. But I think since we're all friends, we're just bantering about the week. If I have beef with Rachel, I'll wait to the podcast and let it out. And it's natural that way, and the audience loves it. So I think it's therapy in some ways that we hold on to, and we air it out for the audience to hear. But I think it's, no matter how much you're improv or you're in comedy, you do have to have structure and your talking points. So it's kind of a thing where you can stay within that time frame that your audience is used to.
Yeah, and structure for us helps really from a cost efficiency standpoint. Being able to bring in exonerees or doing our live shows in Sing Sing or federal correction facilities, making sure we've got seasons planned out for 12 episodes with 12 influencers ahead of time, so there's no surprises, so costs don't go up.
So moral of the story is be organized and consistent, okay? So I think that we can all agree that, the diversity within the Latinx community really lives and breathes in the digital space, also like in social media and platforms like that. How important is it to diversify the subject matter you discuss on your podcast, or just diversity in general? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you can.
For Moderator Lens, diversity is everything. And the diversity of the woman, the nuance of the Afro-Latina, the indigenous woman, the African-American woman, I think that plays a big role on who we call out. But on the other side, we are always looking for allies. And that means that white woman, that's our ally. And not just an ally, but a co-conspirator, right? So she's here to speak that language and stand up for us when it's needed. So diversity is key, and we actually curate our talent because of their diversity of not just race, but culture, and more importantly, diversity of thought, which I think is missing in content, and it's not appreciated when put out there by Latinos and Latinas. So diversity is everything, actually.
Did anybody else want to chime in on
that? Yeah, I think our podcast takes pride that we're giving individuals that may have not been on a podcast or have been interviewed, and they're doing amazing things. So I think that we definitely are very specific in getting individuals that we know are on the come up or are doing amazing things, and we need to showcase it. So I think it's very, very important. A lot of times our podcasts will get the big names. If they have a movie coming out, we look at it as something where we need to bring light to people that are doing great things.
I think about season 1 for wrongful conviction, where Raymond Santana, who was episode number 2, and Raymond's story was part of the Central Park Five. And when they brought him into question, they brought he was 14 years old, and the adult that they brought with him was abuela. She didn't speak any English. So you had 2 detectives that worked this kid over and got him to confess in front of a woman who didn't speak the language of the room that he was being charged in. So that there's a diversity part that there's a spotlight we have to show because there are some inadequacies. There are some, in the legal space, there are issues that, language is not a benefit. It's a detriment.
And for when we think about diversity, as being like, a dark-skinned Latinx women, like a Black Dominican, sometimes I'm in the space and I'm usually like the only dark-skinned Latinx person, and I'm just like, hey, I speak Spanish too. My parents from the capital. It's cool. So like, I'm always the type of person to be like, hey, this is cool. We should invite these people too. And I think sometimes when it comes to opportunities, as also me being queer, I always tell people like, hey, like, you know what? Who's really great? You should listen to all these other podcasters too, and like build that community within each other. Because like, yeah, you could listen to me talk about like baggage, but like, what happened if you're into gaming and you want to hear like somebody else talk about it? Hey, look at this podcast. They cool too. Check them out. So diversity and building that community within each other, and like making sure that you're spreading that opportunity out. Because if somebody asks me, hey, can you speak about Black trans women? I'll be like, hey, how about a Black trans woman could talk to you about how to support them? You know what I mean? Or support her. Like, so it's kind of like knowing kind of like a roster of people so you could share that out.
So I think it was really interesting that, Nathalie, that you brought up allyship and, bringing in allies to your podcast or your audience in general. I guess my question is, like, how do you bridge the gap for people who don't have any clue about the Latinx community, or if you do decide to talk about a subject matter that is really geared towards Latinos, like, how do you bridge that gap to your listeners?
That's a good question, but a lot of the people that we are reaching out to are people that in essence are interested in what we're talking about. And when we do, our checkpoint, which is what we say, which is like, are they truly allies or just want to take our community of people of color for their benefit, and there is a fine line between the two. And I've been a victim of that other side enough to now know that not every white person or every white man, every white woman that says they're there for the cause is truly there for the cause. That being said, Latinos and Latinas that are creating content are poor, and we shouldn't be. We should be making the most money at this point, and we're not. Why? Because there's not enough allies that are at the top that have these positions of power, mostly old white men, right? And they don't really show back that love, but they want to take your content and rape you for it. So I say that to say this. Give people that say they're there to help a chance, but do your work and a research to really understand if they are really the players or the allies you want to build with. So there's a full scan of who they are, and most of them reach out to us, so we're fortunate enough to have that.
And also understand what your true audience is. Make sure that you're real about your numbers, what your potential for brand extensions are, and what how much engagement you're truly driving. I mean, there's the ability that I'm going to reach 5 or 10 million people one day with a podcast is probably not realistic if it's not built in a tiered approach with paid, owned, or or created media. You've got to have real expectations, and then a benchmark where you're going to be in 6 months or 3 months to know that you're growing, at least not from an audience standpoint, but from a story standpoint.
Wow. How important is social media? Like, in building your audience and getting more listeners, what tools do you guys use to broaden your audience?
Networking, going to events, talking to people, talking to your friends. Your friends are like your biggest fans. Like, they will support you. They will tell somebody else. Like, I had one of my friends go to networking, take my business cards. Was like, well, look, she funny. She got natural hair. Check her out. She cool. And, and like, she got so many people interested. I was like, okay, thanks, girl. So like, being able to build that community. And with social media, I think my social media, like my own personal social media is like 100 people, but in my podcast, social media is so much more. But being honest, I'm just like, hey, yo, I had breakfast and I didn't like it, y'all. Not feeling it. And then people just, yeah, me too. And building that realness, just like being yourself. And like, people just want to see you. They don't want to see the make-believe you or what they think you are. They just want to see you, not every day, but they want to see you show a tweet. Like, oh my God, what you thought about this? That was cool too. So just being real on social media and just being yourself.
With us, I mean, yeah, we definitely are engaged on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I think it's important because they give you feedback. You know, they're listening to you on a consistent basis. They can tell if you're falling off or you're getting better, and they'll let you know. So I think it's very important to engage with them to get that honest feedback to make the product better. And so sometimes we do contests, sometimes we do, you know, just some talking points. But I think it's very important to engage because there are people that are actually talking about you using the hashtags. So it's something that you do have to do consistently and build it because they will reward you in the end as far as giving you that feedback that's so important.
For us, for loudspeakers, social media is a testing ground. Like, we found a lot of talent through social media. Taxstone, one of our biggest podcasts, came from social media, and he was able to translate what he was doing on Twitter to the podcast. Doesn't happen for everyone, but for us, at least for me, like, I'm always looking for talent on Instagram, you know, everywhere, social media wise.
I would say social media has been our best friend through the process. And of course, physical networking. People forget, like, the old school physical network, like, show up, even if it's for 5 minutes, shake hands with the right people. Believe me when I tell you, opportunities come out of that. But social media, in particular, Instagram, has been our best friend. And to Juan Bago's point, like, there's, you know, this virtual connection with your audience, and they're very honest when they love it, when they hate it. And I think everything about that experience is needed for podcasters. And also, I would say be as authentic as you can and be real, and talk about that through some video content as well, because it helps people realize that you're not just this fake person behind a microphone. There's, like, truth and authentic vibes there. So it does help. And yeah, Instagram has been great.
I mean, you guys have mentioned engagement, like, with your listeners and you know, the people who listen to your podcast. So how do you navigate negative comments? Yeah, I mean, that's a real thing,
Gently.
right? Right?
Influencers who may be touchy about, you know, if they're talking too close to the mic or they're clearing their voice. I mean, launching Wrongful, the first month of reviews, we had to use as constructive criticism to make the show better because we weren't going to survive if we didn't.
Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, that's kind of hard because I'm very sensitive. But no, I mean, you know, we're comedy. So recently we have a segment that's fake news, and we had somebody that really took it personal. She thought it was real, and it was like, no, it's not. Right. But it's kind of like you kind of have to dig a little bit and find out where it's coming from, because like anything, you can have positive feedback, which is just sugarcoating, and it's nothing of value, and then you have the negative that's just personal. Maybe somebody that wanted to start a podcast never could do it, so they vent on you. So you kind of have to navigate where it's coming from and to really get that nugget of true information and not take it personal or block them.
Or block them.
Is your blocking strong? You like, it's pretty strong blocking?
Block. Yo, how you find me on LinkedIn, yo?
Oh, that's so truth right there. We have blocked people, but it has been pure hate, you know. And honestly, our biggest, I guess, outlash or negative has been around any politician, women that we've included. And then we have, like, these misogynist Trump voters coming on and being angry at the cause and at the woman. And Alexandra Ocasio was one of our latest ones where we got just a shitload of, like, bad comments and negativity, and it was mostly from men. It wasn't even women, which was ironic because I didn't even know you guys listen to our podcast, right? Like, these guys from Middle America, and we block them. I take it one step further. I spam them and then tell Instagram that it's hate speech. So I actually go all the way. I'm very petty like that when it comes to hate.
You're very dedicated, very dedicated.
Putting some hate, and it doesn't come from a place of honesty and truth, because I'm okay with you being like, that was a whack podcast. Fine, I'll take it. It hurt my feelings. But when you're coming from a place of hate and you're not, you know, you're trying to oppress the woman, then I'm gonna take it a step further and let, you know, Mark Zuckerberg know, like, dude, this guy's gotta go, you know? But other than that.
Agree. You definitely have to see whether this is like feedback that you're like, okay, like, you know, maybe it's great if y'all don't like overtalk each other. Maybe like y'all should like, oh, is it cool we talk about this? But if people are just hating, then like it really, like, you can't really convince somebody to be like, you know, I want rights. Nah, I don't know. That's not a good look for you. Like, you can't talk to people about like things that are just basic. Like, you can't have a conversation. Then like you gotta block them. I just pretend they don't exist. I'm like, oh yeah, we got a comment the other day, but anywho, and just keep it moving.
So the conversations that you guys have on your podcast, does it spark like dinner time conversations with your own families? Have you challenged your friends and families about topics that you guys have talked about?
When Kyrie said the Earth was flat on Road Trippin', we knew we had a business model. You know, when hearing an NBA star saying that the Earth was flat on one of our shows was something we, you know, especially for an African American show when we're a Latino network, and having a celebrity that made a profound statement that kind of changed the way sports influencers are looked at, you know, in terms of creating their own content, you know, their own story.
Well, I mean, there was one time that I experienced when I went to Dominican Republic, and I was talking about the epidemic of doñas using wheelchairs to get first-class treatment, and that sparked some talk. Yeah, but you know, we are normal people that talk about family members. We have to use code names.
Right.
You know, there's been times, but again, I think it's about how if it's lighthearted, it's not like you're using them in vain as far as negativity and making fun of them. But if it's everyone has a brother or a crazy cousin or something that, you know, but if you do it in a light tone, I don't think you're gonna get like cut off from the Christmas card list, you know? Maybe.
I think about on Bag Ladies, we do talk a lot about things that like colorism. We talk about like hate speech. We talk about like homophobia. And I can't say that I don't have family members that be like, oh, but this and this. And I think at first, I think most of my family, I think my mom doesn't know what a podcast is, so she'd be like, I be listening, but I don't know what it is. I'd be like, all right, that's cool. Thanks, Mom. So I think it's just having an honest conversation, because I think I had a lot of family members just like, so I found out that you were queer. I just don't know what that is, right? If we could just break it down and we're able to have a conversation, because they're just like, I honestly don't have no idea. Like, I don't know what I was saying was offensive. And like, I think it's a good conversation starter for like people in your life to be like, oh my God, like, you were sad that I was late for brunch? I'm so sorry. I didn't know that I made it late, and having those conversations I think is good.
Have you ever like, you lost a friend or?
Oh, I have Trump people in my family that when they know, when I work with Jorge Ramos or, the ignorance factor and being okay with ripping people away from their families at the border, I can't condone it, and I don't really care if we're related, but the ability that, not the hate speech so much, but the guilt or innocence, like Amanda Knox or any of these stories that a lot of us have heard, there's opinions they have without any facts or any really research they've done. It's just what they've heard or they've read. And it's just a reflection of ignorance in most respects.
Okay. Anybody else? No?
My wife doesn't listen to my podcast.
Aww.
She's at least she's honest. I like that. I'm like,
I like that. I hate when people are like, yo, your podcast is good.
Yeah.
So what happened last week? Nah, not yet. Sorry, my bad. It's in my queue.
Yeah.
I'm about to listen to.
She told me. She's like, I don't.
Whatever.
Yeah, subscribe. Just subscribe, rate, and comment, even if it's a fake one.
I'll take it one step further. Having a wife that went through 62 weeks of no paycheck building a podcast company, she would get her friends, the little moms group, and they would sit and listen to Wrongful. And being an audience that's 72% female, it was a book club, but it was about a story that they could then, listen to and actually be empowered to either write or connect or, be involved in some way.
So what equipment do you need to start a podcast, huh? Because for the regular schmegular person, how do you embark on this journey? And how do you also negotiate listening platforms like SoundCloud and like iTunes, like all this type of stuff? Like, how do you get in the door?
Create once, publish everywhere.
Okay.
And really don't. Media for a very long time was about, well, this is exclusive to us, and that hurt us. That hurt the consumer. This is about how do I get it up and out across everything. As a Univision-owned company, I want to be. We have a radio division, but we want to be on Spotify. We want to be on Pandora. We want to be everywhere because the content speaks for itself, as opposed to wanting to own or control.
I'll take it one step further, because Hobbs has a professional studio somewhere in New York City. But for those that don't have the option to have a professional studio, in H6.
I had to break into that studio and bring my wife's kitchen table with 2 microphones that they had to give me it.
But just for, someone that's really trying to start from the bottom and doesn't have Univision or corporate dollars, in H6, I think it's a great investment. You could travel with it. So anyone that's starting one, I think that's the best way to go. I wouldn't use your iPhone one or your phone because the audio doesn't really come out crisp at the end. And audio is everything you have, right? Because it's a podcast. So H6 is great investment. I have a big mixer at home as well that we got per our audio engineer's suggestion, and it's great, but I wouldn't say that's where you start, and that's $1,000 worth of equipment that honestly we use probably less these days than the H6 because we're on the road.
The biggest tip I can tell you if you're going to record on your own with if you're using either devices that you're not used to in your closet. The closet will basically, it'll blanket you so that you don't have an echo, and the clothes will act as a dampener.
Also, YouTube's your friend. Yeah, and just go on there. I learned so much using YouTube. Just from everything, from mics to the H6 is really great. I have 2 of those.
Yeah, that's what we use.
We're in the Univision office, so we use the Univision stuff.
You saw that first table.
The first table was
we
nice. It was like the Last Supper. It was like a long table, for 14 chairs. But no, I think that what they were saying, I think sometimes when you're starting up, work within your means because you don't want to spend all that money. Because sometimes if, like I said, certain people just do a podcast for 6 weeks and then you just spend all that money. I think first build the consistency and then invest in yourself.
For when I completely, yep, everyone's on the table. One thing I would say that when we first started, we just bought mics for $20, and we're just like, okay, and we use our computers, right? $20 mics, exactly. It works. You hear me? And
shout out to the $20 mic.
$20 mic.
Got a big fan base over here.
It was $20. We used programs that were free. I used Audacity and I used GarageBand because it was on my computer, and I was like, there you go. I did my little edit, and it got to a point the $20 mics was acting funny. They wanted to be part of the show too. So, I was like, and I remember that day that me and my co-host, Lena, she was like, so what we trying to do? And I was like, we got to go to Best Buy. And we went to Best Buy. We talked to the guy like, look, we got no money. What should we get, sir? And he let us know. He like, yo, invest in a Yeti. A Yeti was $100. But before, we did this podcast for 7 months before we got a Yeti. So we was just like, we had a little money in the bank. Somebody donated $50 to us once. We're like, okay, all we got to pay is $150, that's fine. We're good. But start off easy, use what you have. You already have the tools. I know the iPhone recording might not sound the clearest, but if you close your window, put up some art in your room so the noise doesn't bounce, put a towel underneath the door, studio for free.
Wow. I'm gonna have to start renting out space.
So how do you guys keep challenging yourself to make it fresh and new for yourself and for your audience that listens to you? Don't all jump at once.
I mean, the world's chaos right now. I mean, there needs to be positive voices, and there needs to be things that shine on accomplishments outside of what we see in traditional news and reporting. I mean, there are, whether it's, female empowerment for entrepreneurship, or getting behind things that, we just launched to my knowledge, at Univision, the first Latino LGBT show, and it's in Espanol, and Noticias wrote it. I mean, and if you would have told me a couple years ago that Univision would promote or create an original programming based on LGBT content, I probably would say they wouldn't. But that you have to now, because that's the reality of the marketplace.
Well, I mean, as a big fan of the Bodega Boys and Two Dope Queens, I think for us as a group, collectively, our backgrounds has been sketch, filmmaking, and stuff. I think we want to go to even a larger medium, stay with the podcast, but I think we consistently are challenging ourselves to have better guests, bigger platform, bigger audience, everything. So I think it's for us, it's constantly as artists to grow and challenge ourselves in that aspect of it.
I think for us, one of our mission goals for this year and for the following years, podcasting is very male-dominated, extremely male-dominated. So I know for me and for some of my coworkers at Loudspeakers, focusing more on producing shows by women and having women also produce the shows.
Hello.
So, that's I kind of had to take a little break. But my next show is hosted by women and produced by women, logos by women, music by women.
Oh, yeah.
And it just, it was a goal that I had because, I'm I'm a father. I have a daughter, my wife, my mom. So, you know,
Your wife listens to those podcasts, I'm sure, the all women ones.
I hope so.
So I get inspired by so much, but I will say I consume a lot of the podcasts in the Latino space. Latinos Out Loud are one of our faves. Juan Bago has been a homie for so long. And really, all my Latinos, when I go to Washington Heights, when I go to the hood in Jersey where I'm from, I go to these, I love to eat. I know, you're like, yeah, right, bitch, you're like the skinny one. But like, I do love to eat. And one of my things, like, I go to restaurants, yo chismeao with the ladies, I talk, and I love strip clubs, women clubs. I go talk to them too. I go to communities around women, one of them called La Brujas Club, which I founded and I host every month in the Lower East Side. Women from all over come I've never met, and their stories are truly inspirational, and they make you have a perspective on the woman, and it's not just here, right? So going outside of your networks is a great way to get inspired,
And I'll just say real quickly, I think to get new stuff, I listen to a lot of the people, I just listen to a lot of podcasting. So like, I listen to all the people that I really, really enjoy. Like, I love Queer Walk, I love Inner Horizon, I love T and Cream and J, hey boo. And I listen to their content. I'm just like, what is it that I like about them so much? What makes me come back every week? And I'm just like, yo, I love the fact how they broke this down. I love the fact that they have a theme song. I love the fact that they were reading letters. Like, oh, this is nice. Like, what is a way that we can make this bag lady-ish? Okay, like we could do this. So just building that community and just like listening to people that you like, because you coming back for a reason. So like, what is it? Now I'm not saying like, copy people, but take back what's that initial like that you like from them and put it into your show.
All right.
Show notes in Espanol.
All right, so now we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. Don't all jump at once. No? Yeah. Yes. I think we have mics, no? Over here.
Oh, okay. They on the side. Okay, got to stand and everything.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I think it was a great session you guys had right now. It was very informative. I have 2 questions. I have a million questions, but I'm just going to keep it to 2. My first question is, when you first get like that, that start, right now I got that energy of just starting podcasts, but I don't want to stick to just one thing. I just started doing a sports podcast for the New York Giants. I was covering the New York Giants as much as I can as a fan, but I also want to work on other things. I think in terms of that, what should you do? Can you just do many different podcasts at the same time, or just stick to one thing and just make it work, that one thing work? That's my first question.
I'll say, because I'm currently working at a podcast company called Pineapple Street Media, and I definitely, first thing is get the first idea down, get that consistency, get that schedule, and once you feel comfortable, like after a couple of months, you'll be like, all right, I kind of got this, figure out how to create the other one, but don't just start off like recording, start your outline, who do you want to get, things like that. I know people are like, oh, you can multitask, but nah, like I don't think a lot of people can multitask. So I say focus on one thing and then create others.
I completely agree with you. And yeah, we're all multitaskers, but to be great at the podcasting world, you have to find your own voice first, and it takes you to focus on that one big theme. But also, I would say don't block yourself out to just the New York Giants. Maybe just make it a sports podcast. Do only the New York Giants first, but then that gives you breath for other sports teams later, and you don't have to create a whole new podcast as well. Unless the next podcast is like sex, right, and not sports. And
has nothing to do with sports.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, at least not football.
Got it.
Well, it depends on the Giants, because if the Giants go 0-4, I don't think you're going to
No,
podcast.
that's not true. That's not true.
Shade.
Even if they do bad or good, people still want to listen. I think if they do bad, people want to listen even more.
They want to vent
Yeah.
with you, yes, of
That's a
course.
shade, right?
I would suggest to focus on this one because you're going to make mistakes. So you're going to learn from those mistakes, and you're not going to do them for the next one.
Then my next question is just like, what are the goals that I should set as just starting up as a podcast? I love doing it. I've done already 3 episodes, you know what I'm saying? I don't care if nobody has listened to it yet. I'm still enjoying it. I'm having fun doing it. But what should be my realistic goals? What should I be like, okay, I should stop because this is not going nowhere? Or, hey, something's going on. Some people are actually paying attention. Just to give you guys a little background, I just started off, 2 years ago, doing Instagram videos of doing like reviews of the games and stuff like that. And I got a lot of feedback off of it, some positive, some negative. And then, I stopped. I stopped last year just because I was dealing with personal issues, health issues, and stuff like that. Came back, and now I'm doing a podcast. But now I'm just like, when should I like? When is it too much? When is it that I'm just like, okay, I'm not going anywhere, and I should just stop it?
I'll tell you, don't stop. Don't stop, won't stop, don't. Just because I think you're gonna start off small. I remember at one point we're just like, okay, we want enough people that could fill a classroom. It was 20. We're like, all right, we good with 20. I could be a teacher in there, right? And then from there we started going on. So I think just committing yourself to putting deadlines, like, hey, by this month I want to hit 60 people, and then 80, and then 100, and then so forth and so forth. Like, don't feel like just because people won't listen. If your content is good, everyone's giving you really good feedback, it means it's good. So people want to listen to it. So I say just don't stop.
I was gonna say, you haven't even really started, so don't even think of that, but create end goals for yourself, goals that and benchmarks. So like, by this date, I'll have this many episodes. Also, I made this mistake in the beginning. We're like, let's do as much content because everyone wants to hear it. It's like, no, give them quality over quantity. And I think that being said, maybe don't make it a weekly, maybe make it a bi-monthly podcast so that you don't feel that you're overwhelmed by it in the beginning, and then grow it out later. But yeah, just one step at a time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have another question.
Hi, thanks you guys so much for sharing this free information. It's always nice to hear the plugs talk for the low. My name is Brittany, and I'm interested in starting a podcast surrounded by women and hip hop. And I wanted to know, what are some mistakes that you learned from early on when starting your podcast?
Talking too close to the microphone. I mean, it's one of the things that you and the listeners your reviews will give you a guidance on what you're doing well and what you're not. And a lot of times it's fundamentals. Releasing consistently on Monday mornings or Thursday afternoons. It's just kind of finding that rhythm with your audience. They're going to tell you, they're going to hold you to a standard that they'll either let you know what you're doing well or what you're doing wrong.
I agree with talking too close to the mic could be an issue. That we started doing that when we first started. Yeah, I think it's just consistency. I feel like answering Mr. Giant over here. I think that if you're gonna work on it, it's consistency, like making your personal deadlines. When I did a podcast with Jamie, who's on the podcast as well, called Translators, and one of the issues was that we were never consistent releasing it on time. 1 week was Tuesday, 1 week was Thursday, 1 week is a Monday. So I think that if you can create that foundation and know what you can do as far as every Tuesday, 8 o'clock, then you don't have to push it as much because people are already programmed. So I think that is one of the key things is consistency, because it's like crack. I say it like with our audience at times, if we don't release it on time or if we take a couple of weeks off, they get upset. So if in the beginning where you have an audience is building, you really need to be consistent. And I think that is the goal for you. From the back end, as far as making sure that you allow time to edit it, all that stuff that might give you delays, I think that is the number one thing for me in my experience.
For me is understanding the landscape of podcasting. I think sometimes when you're creating one, you're just so focused on it, but you don't understand like what's going on in Spotify, SoundCloud, and then you start making mistakes by having it on just one platform. I like my podcast everywhere. Like I put them on YouTube. There's a Mixcloud in the UK. Like I have them everywhere. So that would be my advice to you.
I was going to say one mistake we made was that we first launched on Apple Podcasts because it was the easiest thing and it's free. And then we have a lot of people with Android letting us know they couldn't hear Apple Podcasts, and that completely didn't even register because we all had Apples at the time. So have them in platforms where the Android and the Apple user can easily tune in.
And I'll just say, I think being worried about what you're saying, I think that was a mistake. I was definitely worried about like how I sounded on a microphone. Like I got an accent. I'll be mispronouncing words. But once I got over that, like thinking like, oh my God, like maybe I have to sound like this, I just came out with myself. And I think having that confidence is gonna take you a long way.
My question is about ads. Hi, my name is Nidia. Nice to meet you all. You're great. So
Thank you. I saw you prior. We were in the green room. We saw you at
I
an awesome
remember
question.
you. I actually met
Yes.
you before, like, you know, because I listened to your podcast. Yeah.
Oh,
So I
thank you.
feel special.
I'm blushing right
We
now.
also
You can't
DM,
tell through the video.
you know, whatever.
Okay.
But so my question is about advertising. I am an avid listener of podcasts, and I want to talk about specifically the read. I don't care if the read makes the ad sound sexy. I am going to skip over those ads. But I want to talk about placement and getting the brands. Do the brands come to you, or do you like put yourself out there and get brands? And also as far as like doing the surveys, I'm talking about the read because I remember when they were like, hey, can you guys do this stupid survey so we can like make money off y'all?
That's where you got to
know?
ask them for more money. I mean, when they're asking you to do the above and beyond, then you're tacking on a price to.
Right. So, like, in terms of that, do you guys ask your audience to get surveys, and do you reach out to sponsors, or do you wait for them to come to you and then you ask your consumers to do the survey so you can make a price list?
We do both.
Yeah, I was going to say that's why I was mentioning show notes earlier. We just closed a piece of business last week with LaCroix. And they want to know what that Spanish language consumer looks like in podcasting. And, you know, there's not a display angle that we can do, or, you know, so we integrate into the show notes. And so we got, you know, there's a sweeps component where you can enter to win, but we still have the starting point of getting an understanding of what the audience look like. And then, you know, if you're asking about where to find the podcasting revenue, it's at 5 agencies. I mean, it's at Ad Results, it's at Veritone, it's at Performance Bridge. The New York shops, they're not there yet. You know, they're terrestrial mindset, but your Ad Results is $90 million in brands. I mean, everything you hear from Blue Apron to, you know, NetSuite is coming out of these podcast-only shops, and there's only 5 of them.
And if you don't want any ads and you feel like your community is big enough at this point, there's patreon.com, which in essence allows you to not have any advertisers, but that means your community has to fund it, kind of like PBS. So that's just another option. Not everyone has to go down like the typical network, though that does help. Because in essence, they are your foot soldiers to sell. But I say you still do outreach. People are like, how'd you get Rosario Dawson? It wasn't for money, but we DM'd her. And we're like, hey, we're about this. Can we interview you? And she was like, sure. I was like, do we have to contact your agent? She's like, no, I like it. Let's do it. And it was that easy. So I'm using her as an example for like, maybe you do have to reach out to Shea Moisture or to Dove and be like, hey, by the way, this is what I look like. These are my numbers. This is my media kit. Very important. Media kit is very important. Google it. Make it work for yourself. Whether you have an agent or not, you should have your own media kit for your own company or brand. In this case, podcast.
Hello, my name is Daffodil, and I'm one half of the podcast called Puff Puff Give. She's over here, the other half, Misha. I wanted to know, in terms of trademarking your name and, like, you know, your handles and things like that, what steps would you, or what things would you suggest we do?
Protect your IP. I mean, at all costs. You know, protect your IP, what you want, from your social media handles to, I would trademark and copyright everything.
Okay, so go about it the legal way you talking about?
100%, yeah. Because even if you're working with any network that wants to aggregate your content on them, they want to own your IP, run. You know, you've got your ability or your value is owning that logo, those social media handles. Keep those for yourself. Don't let anybody else, you know, take access or have access to them.
How long have you been publishing?
What'd you say? 4 months. Publishing? No, it's been long.
You guys need a second real quick?
They're like 4?
We've actually did our first podcast in January, and so we've just been putting it on SoundCloud. We just recently got on iTunes and Google Play, and it was like a few other companies as well.
That's great you're thinking like that. I've worked on podcasts that they're doing phenomenal numbers, and there's no contracts between anyone. You know, there's also other networks. There's no contracts with some of their big shows. Right. So now, you know, when someone comes with that bag, it's like there's no contracts.
It's the wild west out there and on the podcasting world, which is more reason for you to trademark your stuff, create merch with your stuff, sell that stuff, and through it all, update your media kit. And sometimes you have to be your own agent and your own believer, and sometimes you have to go and sell yourself in person, through DM. I'm a stalker, so like I'm gonna get my money regardless. So if you're not responding to me, that I'm gonna send you an email. I'm gonna make a meeting happen where I'm there. But don't feel like there's a sense of shame to sell, be your best seller. In my case, Sonia is kind of my right hand. So if anyone needs help with podcasting, she's up in the front. But yes, be your best salesperson.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, next question.
Hey, awesome conversation. I gained so much insight from it. I wanted to kind of go back onto the revenue conversation. First, I'm seeing a lot of like branded podcasting happening. So I believe Spotify, for example, just like launched one this week. My question is like, in terms of like doing a branded a branded podcast, so like literally like that's ideas only with this one brand. Can you talk a little bit about that, if that's something that you guys have considered or thought about? And then furthermore, what does the negotiations look like, right? Because on the, I'll say that, I guess maybe to Steven, on your end, like with a large scale company, like what's happening once that media kit has been sent, the meeting has been booked, like what does that look like? And then also too, as content creators on your end, like how do you prep for that? Also, like how do you know it's a true partnership? And I know, Nathalie, you touched on that a little bit, but on both ends, like negotiation, what does that look like for each of you?
I mean, from coming from a startup environment that we built out of 2 offices in Dallas and New Jersey to 108 million people a month with 24 divisions, it's in a video-centric company. It's squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I make one of the things, having worked at Univision for 14 years before in the sales capacity, you know where the bodies are buried. So you know who the person at Noticias is that can help you develop this program or sports. Not every seller and not every person in a traditional company is going to support you. A lot of them don't listen to the podcast, and they don't have an idea of what what Serial's done in terms of that halo effect for brands. But you've got to keep telling your story, and I make sure whether it's programming or news or sales, I'm always presenting, and I'm always telling them about something that's new and this is coming, and it's a theater of the mind. You're telling them something that you're describing, and you want them to buy it. But you've got to be loud, and you've got to be in their face, because if not, people will do what's easy, and what's easy is traditional media. They can take a spot order. Going out and selling TED in Espanol, it's a little more difficult. But so you got to be loud, and you've got to have the research and the data to back it up.
Okay. And I'll just say, if working with a brand, if you're afraid to lose it, then probably don't do it. I think, like, for example, if somebody asked me to do a show about video games, I'm like, yeah, sure, y'all could keep that. That's fine. Like, I like video games, but it's cool. But for my bag ladies, I'm just like, oh, no, I want that to be under us. I always want that to be under us. So always ask yourself, like, if someone takes this, like, hey, we want to go with different hosts, or we want to change the format, we actually want to do this direction, you have to ask, like, am I okay with losing this and moving on? But if not, then you have to figure out how that's going to work with another company or another, like, brand.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Oh.
We're a little cut on time. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys. But you do have time now for the reception, and we can all mix and mingle, but we just got to break this room down. So a round of applause for our amazing moderator and panelists.
Thank you.
Check.